Hey friends, welcome to a special Black Friday broadcast here on the Line of Fire. So we're today exclusively online. We're not on our radio shows. They're playing a different show today. This is when we're pre-recording on Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving, and answering questions that were posted on various social media accounts. We said anything. Ask me about anything. Even we got some sports questions in here. So we're going to have some fun today. So this is especially for everyone watching on Facebook and YouTube. Hope this is a blessing to you. You may be watching it live on Friday. You may be watching it at a different time. We don't have our normal musical intros. We won't have our normal commercial breaks. We'll take one quick break and basically come right back without interruption and give you, maybe about 45 minutes of programming today. But listen, just want to remind you that Dr. Stengler reached out to us and said, hey, let's do something special for all your listeners and viewers during the holiday season, the Thanksgiving season. So we've got till November 28th to take advantage of this. But tell all your friends, tell your family, spread the word that when you go to vitaminmission.com, this time use the code HEALTH, 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 right? Use that code. And instead of the normal 10% discount you get as a Line of Fire viewer, you get a 20% discount. So if you want to get a subscription to things where you get recurring things, the certain multivitamins or immune system things or stuff to help with sleeping or other wellness aspects, go ahead and do that because you get 20% off. And then Dr. Stengler in turn makes a donation to our ministry. Someone said, why are you doing this on the air? Well, it helps you. That's why we're doing it on the air, because I really want to see you healthy and thriving. And these are great health supplements to do it. And plus, you get a discount. This is something that Dr. Stengler said, hey, let's partner together on this. And then money comes in to our ministry to help us reach more people, which means we can do more stuff for free, right? If you say, well, I don't like that. All right, then send in lots of donations, all right, and buy the supplements for everybody else. Pay for them, right? But otherwise, this is a great win-win thing. So remember, you've got till the end of the day, November 28th Eastern time. Use the code HEALTH, HEALTH, and get a 20% discount. The more people you tell, the better. Dr. Stengler is really happy to bless as many people as possible and to introduce you to his supplements. And he, in turn, is being generous with us to help us be generous to everybody and offer tons of stuff for free. We're always looking to figure out how to get you more free content, as opposed to building something where you get a few minutes free and then have to pay, which is a model that others use, and it works for them. It's the way they're able to do what they do, and some are actually doing it. They're for-profit businesses, all right? And then others in ministry, it's the way they can do things. And God bless them. Let each one do what works best, and they feel before the Lord. But our goal is constantly to get you as much free content as possible. And then other things, of course, there's always more classes, deeper things you can pay for. All right. So I'm going over to questions that were posted on Facebook. I'm going to start here. May, what was it that brought the Brownsville revival to an end? And what would you do differently the next time you are in a revival situation? A Lavish Child said, as someone who saw it end and was there, greed, and something to do with the Assemblies of God, I've long forgotten the details. Dr. Brown stayed true to convictions and left, but I'd love to hear his answer too. Hey, Lavish Child, thanks for your kind words about me. There was a conflict with the Assemblies of God, whom I honor and respect to this moment. But greed was not an issue. Greed was not an issue. I can assure you as an insider, greed was not an issue. Okay, a few things. In the height of the revival, when the school was birthed and now we're raising up and sending out laborers around the world, David Wilkerson talked to me on the phone one day, and he said, the school is the smartest thing you could have ever done, because that is going to be the lasting fruit of the revival. Because the maximum length of revival is going to be 4 or 5 years. Now, there have been things that have run longer in different ways, all right? Meetings have gone on longer in certain cities or churches. You have revival movements over a period of decades. But in terms of an intense outpouring in one place at the height of intensity, it can only go so long. So on the one hand, I believe that in many ways, the revival fulfilled its goal. And then we had a split, and then the enemy got in, and then things took a hit. But revival in its full intensity can only last so long. I mean, we were going until we're ready to drop almost every night of the week, and sometimes 7 days a week. And I remember looking at schedule between ministering on the road and ministering in revival. I remember one time it was over 40 days, and there was never a day where I was not ministering and or traveling. And I was going 80 to 100 hours a week of ministry-related activity. So there's only so long you can go on with that intensity. But the goal is for the revival to bring you to a certain point and now move from there. In many ways, I believe we were at that next point to move forward together, and the enemy got in, partly because of our exhaustion. And there was a split between John Kilpatrick and me, etc. We've been reconciled friends, co-workers, all these many years since. And again, I fully honor and respect the leaders of the Assemblies of God and the denomination as a whole. We don't have conflict. We're all good. But in terms of things that did break down, things that were done wrong, one was that the flesh gets in different ways. I believe that just human flesh came out in the midst of this, and that started to break down some of the relationships. I know God did a purging in me in the time afterwards, and I saw more flesh in my own life. There may have been certain control factors on a denominational level that came in, because no one can own a revival or a move of God in that respect. That may have happened. Nancy and others, my wife Nancy and others, felt that when we went out as a team and did these Awake America events in different cities and would do several of these a year, that further drained us, and that the flame at Brownsville was so sacred that all of the emphasis had to be put there. You know, did pride come up in some of our hearts? I mean, that's a question that God can answer. But the exhaustion, the conflicts that arose on a denominational level, the human flesh that just came out. You know, I used to joke with the guys that the greatest miracle in the revival was that the four of us, so the three principal leaders before I got there, John Kilpatrick, Steve Hill, Lendell Cooley, and then me coming in 11 months later, and then for the next 4 years together, that the greatest miracle is that we all got along so well, because in different circumstances, we might not have all been part of the same team. It's very unlikely that we all would have been part of the same team, just being very different characters. But it was such a joy and privilege and amazing to work together. And overall, relatively little tension. But then humanity kicks in after a while, and exhaustion, and the enemy got in. So in that sense, what was building, and now we move on from there together, that didn't happen. So it definitely got short-circuited in that regard. If I had to do it over, that's the challenging question. Because in the midst of an outpouring that intense, in the midst of crowds coming from over 130 nations, in the midst of such desperate hunger, thirst, I mean, you're talking about names actually recorded, not repeat people coming up, but different names recorded. Over 300,000 different people responding to the altar call in one local church. The intensity of everything, it's easy to say, I would do this differently. I would do that differently. But it's easier said than done. But if anything could be done differently, I would say I would have wanted to see us spend more time together as leaders outside of the revival context, you had this feeling of incredible closeness, incredible camaraderie, because you're going until you're ready to drop, literally every night in the trenches together, getting slandered, maligned together, as well as experiencing the glory of God together. But to deepen those personal relationships, on my end, to have been less of an Iron Man, in other words, to cut back on schedule in different ways, so as to get some more rest in, that would have been important. And then even with that, just to walk even more closely with the Lord, to not let flesh come up. But otherwise, what God did was so amazing and lasted a substantial period of time. And we got to pour into people that to this moment are bearing fruit and sparking fires of revival around the world. So the move continues through them. I hope to finish writing a book at some point. I started it during the Brownsville days, never finished it. And, maybe 10, 15 years ago, I just felt in my spirit, you're going to finish it. In other words, there's going to be another wave and the book's going to be necessary. But it's on 20 ways to put out the Spirit's fire. Things not to do if you want to see God continue to move. Okay, let's see here. Different questions. Okay, Brent. Okay, Doc. What's your favorite classic rock band and your favorite brand of drums? We said anything goes today. All right. We said anything goes. So my favorite classic rock band. So again, I look back at the music with mixed feelings. On the one hand, there's tremendous musical virtuosity and giftedness and creativity. On the other hand, it's associated with a part of my life that was rebellion, the whole 60s sex, drugs, rock and roll. A lot of these bands epitomized that, right? So if I listen to music today, it's kind of from the outside, either looking back and remembering what was happening then in the culture and trying to get a deeper spiritual understanding. I did that some years ago because I had almost 30 years of no contact with the music virtually at all. Or then I could just step out and listen on a purely musical level. Like a lot of people say, I love this band, I love that band. I'm thinking, you do? But they were like fully rebellious. Well, people don't know that they're just listening to the the music or et cetera. But the bands, probably the one that would have been my number one favorite in those days was Cream. Of course, Ginger Baker recently passed away. Year something before that, Jack Bruce. So it's just Eric Clapton surviving from that. But probably just in terms of a rock band and musical virtuosity, it would have been Cream. Favorite brand of drums, I mean, unfortunately, I haven't had a set of my own for almost 50 years. So originally, I think I had a Rogers set. I may have had a Gretsch drum thrown in with it. So, I see different drums, DW sets and different ones that seem, look really nice, but I haven't really played on any. So I'm sure drum making has come a long way since those old days. Okay, let's see here. All right, here's another fun one. Samuel. Okay, here goes. Jordan or LeBron? I say Jordan. How about you, Dr. Brown? Oh, of course. Of course, Michael Jordan over LeBron James. Yeah, obviously. That's no argument about that. And you just get 6-0 in finals, right? And then you get some of the playoff series where LeBron, after winning finals, has been, the team just wiped out by like Phoenix last year. And then, just the bad experiences players. So he's obviously a phenomenally gifted athlete. I take real exception to some of his politics at times, but putting that aside, and then you could even argue over the years, here and there, James may have brought up the level of the whole team. But you could see in Los Angeles, say if he didn't have Anthony Davis, they were sunk there. And Kawhi Leonard hits a free throw, seals a game against Miami. He doesn't win that championship. Draymond Green doesn't get technical, or doesn't get suspended, and Golden State probably wins that series. So you knock out, you got a lot more failures And by the way, I don't watch sports avidly. I just remember stuff. I got a decent memory, right? So these little things I remember here and there. So again, it's all questions on the table today. We're just having fun on Black Friday. All right. Yeah. So hands down, Jordan, and especially these years have gone on, even though LeBron got another championship, what's going to happen this year? Unlikely. So he's been a phenomenal athlete. And I know very committed to his athleticism as Jordan. So you have to think that these guys are the elite of the elite of the elite of the elite. And then to stand out even above them, it's not just athletic giftedness. It has to be a certain drive. It has to be a certain push. Yeah, I saw a story about Tom Brady and his discipline. And he said, look, he's not specially gifted athletically. He's not fast. He doesn't have this really good arm. And yet he's done things nobody ever dreamed of doing in football. And now in his mid-40s, still playing. And a large part is the discipline with which he lives. Not just the drive, but the discipline. So he's at I read this a couple of weeks ago. A year or two ago, he's at an event with Charles Barkley. It's a celebrity golf tournament. And it's before the tournament, it's raining. And Barkley's looking for Brady and sees he's in the parking lot. Now, this is in May, if I'm correct. He sees him in the parking lot doing sprints, right? Just sprint, running as fast as you can, breathe a little, run as fast as you can. So it's painful, right? These wind sprints. He's doing sprints. And Barkley says to him, what are you doing? He goes, I'm trying to win a Super Bowl. Oh, hang on. That is going to be maybe 7-8 months down the line. Yeah, but that's what he's doing now to get there. So I appreciate the discipline that it takes to compete at a certain level like LeBron has these many years. But on a sports comparative level, Jordan, hands down, and taking the years off, and then what if he didn't take those years off? But even with that, taking those years off, coming back the way he did, and then not always having a team at that elite level and still winning 6-0 in finals. So yeah, hands down there. Okay. RJ, Dr. Ron, would love to see you do a long-style conversational podcast with different individuals that hold some cultural relevancy, such as Dr. Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro and the things of the Lord Jesus. I believe it would be a fascinating and edifying discussion for all. I'd love to do it also. Would absolutely love to do it. To make it happen, I'm not sure how to do that. Ben Shapiro knows who I am. We've interacted some with Jeremy Boring, who oversees Daily Wire. So he and Ben are co-workers and colleagues and friends. Some years ago, I shot an email to Ben and said, "Hey, I don't think you want to do this, but I get constant requests for me to have a discussion with you about Jesus being the Messiah or Jews and belief in Jesus and that kind of thing. And I assume you don't want to do that, but just want to let you know I'd love to. I get requests about it constantly." And he shot me back an email immediately. "Hey, Dr. Brown, thanks for writing, but I don't enjoy religious debates," something like that. And now he's had on his show like John MacArthur and people like that. So he's absolutely happy to have Christians on. And I'm quite sure that Ben Shapiro, being Ben Shapiro, doesn't have any fear. Oh, well, Michael Brown's a debater. Oh, Ben Shapiro's a debater. Well, Michael Brown knows his stuff. Well, Ben Shapiro knows his stuff. And even if I've specialized in this more than he does, I don't think he has any fear of doing it. But maybe because it's Orthodox Jew versus Messianic Jew, it could create a certain tension he doesn't want to create, alienate certain Christian viewers he doesn't want to. I don't know. But certainly I don't think for a split second he's avoiding doing it, like out of fear or something like that. But just, I didn't think he'd want to. I didn't think it was his thing. But maybe it'll happen one day. Ask the Lord to open that door, to put it on his heart. I've never tried to push it. And plus, he may just think, I got better guests to have on, whatever. So I've got the utmost respect for him and what he does, and obviously want him to believe the same as I do. But of course, the utmost respect for Ben. Jordan Peterson was on our radio show before, I doubt he even remembers it, before he sprung to international prominence. And I just assumed he was a born-again Christian professor, beleaguered This poor guy coming under attack. I get him on the air, and he was anything but beleaguered. It was like, whoa, this guy's full of fight, totally feisty. Whoa, unashamed. And maybe not born again Christian, obviously Christian perspective, but maybe not born again Christian. Then, of course, international prominence. So I've been thrilled to see this. Just as Ben Shapiro was prominent for a while, but he's exploded even to greater prominence, which I'm so thrilled to see. So would Jordan Peterson have me on or come on a show with me? We've never reached out to do it. We've never reached out. I would love for him to do it, and we could have some in-depth conversation either on his podcast or on mine. Obviously, he has access to any guest imaginable because of the prominence he has. But I'd love to see it happen. I think it would be really fruitful, not even as a debate with any of these gentlemen. So pray if the Lord's in it, maybe we can reach out, or maybe they'll reach out to us and see it happen. But again, I've got so much respect for these gentlemen. And they've got more than enough guests to interview and more than enough shows to come on. I don't even ask Ben to come on my show if he's got a new book. I figure he's got too many interviews to do, and the biggest stations in the world. It's like I don't even ask him to do it to help promote one of his books. So because I figure they're just set in that regard. All right, friends. With that, we're going to take. Well, you're not even going to know it. We're going to take a mini break in this recording, but before you know it, seconds, we'll be right back to continue our Black Friday broadcast. All right, we continue. We just took a little break to do our show, and now we're coming back. Didn't feel that split second, right? So I'm over on Twitter now, and I'm going to answer some of the questions you posted on Twitter. Carlos, recently for the first time in my life, I heard that the first chapters of Genesis are myths, but at the same time true. What does this mean? How can they be both? Also, if that statement is true, how the average Sunday school teacher should address this subject. I would not say they are myths. I would not say it like that. That is misleading to most and gives the idea that they are not true. Those who are saying they are myths but true would mean, well, Genesis 2 and 3 with Adam and Eve, that we're learning principles, that Eve is not literally taken out of the side of Adam, and that there wasn't a literal talking snake. But it's talking about, it's painting a spiritual picture about how human beings fell and things like that. Even the flood, it's painting a spiritual picture, even though it didn't happen in a literal historical way. I find that problematic in many ways. I have no problem with imagery being used or certain things being expressed in certain ways to convey overall points, but there has to be a literal truth to those accounts. Genesis 1, I do not see as there to teach science. I see it there as to teach theology. So I don't go there to learn science. I go to learn about how God created, who he is, how he rules over the world, principles that he established. So I would not say that they are myths but true. Others are trying to say, well, look, we know historically this couldn't have happened and that couldn't have happened, and there was no universal flood, so we have to have another way to read it. But I don't think we have to surrender those points, personally. All right, John, Leviticus 17:11 atonement. I guess I'm trying to see the fuller picture of the Jewish idea of the Messiah, of what they're expecting. I know you've taught on this before, but why do Jewish people think the Messiah couldn't be the atonement for sin? Is it a misunderstanding of the Old Testament? I know ultimately there's a hardening of heart until Jesus saves them. So, John, the short answer is that when you read explicit statements about the Son of David in the Bible, or the root from Jesse, or the king to be born, there's the emphasis on his ruling and reigning. There's the emphasis of him destroying the enemies of Israel, establishing peace on the earth, regathering the exiles, those kinds of things. When you read a chapter like Isaiah 53, which most Jewish interpreters do not see as referring to the Messiah, they would just look at that as Israel suffering or other suffering. They would look at the high priest had a certain role, but the priest was not the Messiah. They would look at the sacrificial system as having great importance and value, but in their minds, it's not about the Messiah either directly. So we're reading things through a different lens. We see the priestly ministry of the Messiah. We recognize that the Messiah is a priest and a king, a priestly king, in fact. So the priestly aspects of his ministry are overlooked by Judaism. So they emphasize his royal aspect, his teaching aspect, and then he's created even more and more the image of the rabbis in many ways. And they miss that stream of the priestly work, which is why they miss the stream of the suffering work, or they make it a separate messianic figure, Messiah, son of Joseph. And also, let's be honest, human beings, there's going to be a development against what we believe. That things we hold to are going to get now rejected, so Judaism reacts against that. Just like you see Christian leaders reacted against Jewish teachings and went in a certain direction. So that's a major reason. Leviticus 17:11, they would say, yes, within the cultic system of sacrifices, that the atonement was in the blood, but that God was always looking for repentance first. And if we don't have blood, as long as we have repentance and prayer and our own personal suffering and giving charitably, that takes the place. Of course, I differ with that profoundly, but that would be the mentality. And if you will read volume 2 of Answering Jewish Objections to Jesus, you'll get in-depth answers, insights into rabbinic thinking, but in-depth answers to these subjects. Volume 2 of Answering Jewish Objections to Jesus. Renee, please talk about the Urim and Tumim. So this is literally lights and perfections. Lights and perfections. There was something oracular that could be derived from them. And there's a debate. Would it be that they would light up a certain way, kind of a message? If you're asking a question, that one light would be yes, the other light would be no, both lights would be something else. But we don't know. There's all speculation. But these were part of the priestly garment and were consisted of beautiful stones, and they were used for oracular purposes. As I said, to get answers from God. Do we do this or do we do that? Could the answers have been more detailed, like a Morse code? That would be reading a bit more into the text than is self-evident. But you could get a lot of things answered with a yes or a no, or just a few basic options of lights and colors. Beyond that, it's only speculation. We don't know for sure. If you say, no, I know, I read a book and they have all the answers. Well, they're attempting to give all the answers. And then you need to find out why other scholars don't agree and then sort it out. Anthony, advice to those in their 20s. You're still young enough to lay really important foundations for the rest of your life. You're still young enough in your 20s to really create habits that can last a lifetime. Be a person who puts intimacy with God and relationship with God and personal disciplines in your relationship with God first. That a foundation is laid in your life, that you are a person of prayer, a person of the word, a person of outreach, a person of moral purity. Keep laying those foundations and keep renewing your mind rather than let the culture renew your mind and change it. Don't be conformed to the spirit of the age, but rather be transformed by the renewing of your mind. To what extent does a Christian try, change culture, politics, etc., as an outworking of their faith as opposed to simply preaching the gospel? Number one, recognize there's going to be intersection always between the gospel and culture. That's reality. And two, love your neighbors yourself and let that go where it goes. And three, follow the burden and calling. God's called me to address these things much more than your average pastor or evangelist, but it's always from a gospel-based context. So there is no one rule of thumb for everyone, but you seek to be the salt of the earth, the light of the world, and let the chips fall where they may. And then my favorite books, this is always, a massively difficult question because I've got favorite books in so many areas. But I always want to get in a few revival classics like Leonard Ravenhill, Why Revival Tarries, and Charles Finney lectures on the revival of religion. Always want to mention A.J. Heschel's book on the prophets, 2 volumes on the prophets. Great faith-building books. The sermons of Smith Wigglesworth and John Lake were stories of their lives. And then, the sacrificial missionary books. Like one of the great biographies I read was Courtney Anderson, toward the Golden Shore. I believe it was Courtney Anderson, Towards the Golden Shore, biography of Adoniram Judson. But I mean, there's so many in so many categories. So a lot of these are books I read years back. Nancy, if the Bible was written without vowels, punctuation, etc., is there any chance of different readings of the word sentences when they were added, like in the case of the Quran? Thank you, Dr. Brown. Oh, yes, of course. But when we say written without vowels, punctuation, it's not just there's an endless run of letters together, right? So you did have words. You have Greek manuscripts that just kind of run, but then you had the vowels in those. Just kind of back, just those are trickier. But of course, otherwise you have things broken down into sentences, and you could have a sentence break or break in a line. So it's not like it was just endlessly written. And then you have at different stages in history what's called a vowel letter. So the vav or the yud, in some cases the hey at the end of a word, would tell you this vowel is what you're expecting here, or this possibility of vowels. And then later, more punctuation was added. So by the time the final writing of the Hebrew Bible was being done in the centuries before Jesus, you had a certain amount of vowel letters added in, so a certain amount of punctuation. And then, of course, this is being recited, this is being memorized, this is being spoken. It's a largely oral culture. So you have those traditions passed on. But yes, even so, you have varying traditions. So the Samaritan tradition is different than the Masoretic tradition, for example. And at times, reading the Septuagint or the Peshitta or the Vulgate, it's clear that they were looking at or reading the text with different vowel pointing. The Masoretic scribes, beginning maybe 800 years, 900 years after the time of Jesus, in full force, they're adding further accents and punctuation in terms of stop here or pause here. And you can look at it and say, no, I don't agree with that. So you look at it at levels. The written text, first level, then the second level, the vowels, and then on a distant third, the Masoretic accents, which indicate stopping and starting and things like that, emphasis. So that's why you sift it through carefully. That's why we know that the Masoretic tradition is ancient and goes back, that was been passed on in terms of the written text, goes back to the time before Jesus as reflected in the Dead Sea Scrolls. But it was not the only tradition extant. So it's a matter now of looking at it very carefully and then looking at variants. So overwhelmingly, 99% of the time, I don't know what the percentage would be, but the high 90s, you're going to follow the punctuation we have, the vowels we have and things like that. But here and there, you're definitely going to differ. And even with the spelling, you'll see, here's a letter got added at a certain point of transmission. And that's called textual criticism. A lot of this is, and sifting through these things. And again, you have the fact that the word was being recited and repeated and chanted and spoken, memorized. So that means it's not just this widespread kind of anything goes tradition. Now, one last thing. Just so you know, if you're reading a newspaper in Arabic today, or a newspaper in Hebrew, or just an average book, it doesn't have vowels. In other words, the language works in such a way that without the vowels, if you're a fluent reader, 99.9% of the time, you don't need the vowels. If just popular stuff, in other words, you're reading it, you understand it, that's how you learn it. You do have the vowel letters, as they're called, Arabic, Hebrew, Aramaic, they have these. But otherwise, it works better than English without vowels. So it's not as big a jump. Jesus is not God. If Jesus is God and told his followers he was God, how come he had a God? John 20:17. It's an obvious answer. This is the Son speaking. The Son honors the Father, and this is the Son in human form. We know in the very same chapter that Thomas says to him, my Lord and my God, to Jesus. So unless there are two gods, and he's explicitly referred to as Theos, God, in John 1:1. So unless there are multiple gods, unless you're a polytheist, and Jesus is one of many gods, then you have to read the text differently. So that's an easy one. I'm sure you've heard that before, but it's a matter of just going with the evidence. DJC, I've often wondered why Christians continue to vote into office people that clearly don't hold our values. They're just being pragmatic. In other words, they're voting for a political leader. And it'd be ideal if the political leader also held to all their spiritual beliefs, but it's a political leader you're voting for. For example, if you are, you live in a community and you need a dog catcher, you literally don't have a dog catcher in your community, and you got these Rottweilers with rabies that are on the loose in your neighborhood, and they've bitten some children, and some of the children now have rabies. Well, we need a dog catcher. So you got one guy, he's a Sunday school teacher in your church, sweetheart of a guy. I mean, happily married, great family, kids love him, and he's just, I mean, everybody speaks well of him on the job and everything. But he couldn't catch a dog if you gave him a nuclear bomb. Another guy in your city, in your community, he's been married 3 times, currently separated from his 3rd wife. Every other word out of his mouth is profanity. His kids don't even talk to him anymore. This guy will catch 3 dogs with his bare hands at the same time. Who do you hire as the dog catcher? The other guy, the profane guy. Why? Because it's a dog catching job. That's why. So it's simply a matter of we're electing a political leader and saying, okay, so we have a pragmatic choice here. And this guy's really good in the economy, but is weak on pro-life and is weak on family and marriage and is weak on Israel. This guy is really strong on all of our moral issues and stands with Israel. He's not so good with the economy. It's like, well, it's more important to us to elect someone that's going to hold to our pro-life values, et cetera, et cetera. And we'll have to trust God for blessing on the economy. So everybody's trying to balance things out. So that, to me, when I'm thinking about how to best change America, how to best influence our country, I got voting way down the list. It's in my top 10, but it's way down in terms of the most important things that we can do. Hey, I'm going to take some more questions, but just a reminder, in case you missed this earlier somehow, until November 28th, till the end of the day, Eastern Time, November 28th, you can use the code HEALTH. When you go to vitaminmission.com, just click to shop, find out all the options, because Dr. Stengler, our sponsor, has a wide range of health supplements, be it with women's problems, men's problems, multivitamins, general health. We want to see you healthy. So that's why we're so happy to make these available to you at a discount. So check out everything that's available, stuff for your immune system, etc. And then when you order, you not only get a 10% discount, and then Dr. Stengler in terms donates to our ministry, which is a beautiful thing. But they reached out to us and said, let's do something special for everybody for Black Friday, etc. So we started it right before Thanksgiving, going to the 28th, you get a 20% discount, 20% off. And that means if you want to subscribe to something and you order it, you're getting 20% off. That's just going to stay there, right? So take advantage of this. It's a great, great time to get some of these supplements. Get them for holiday presents. Get your family thinking about being healthy. So vitaminmission.com, check out everything available. Then when you're checking out, put in the code HEALTH, and you get a double discount until November 28th. All right, let me go back to Facebook. And I got a few more ones on Facebook I wanted to address. So hang on. I am heading over there. Oh, I am so close. I am so very, very close. And okay, here we go. Let me see some other questions that came in here. Alan, can you bring clarity to the conflict between hating evil, Psalms 97:10, and loving your enemies, Matthew 5:44? Or are we to separate the evil from the person? It's a great question, and it can be answered in many different ways. When we say love the sinner, hate the sin, that often overly simplifies things. What I would say is I utterly reject and stand against who you are and everything you are trying to do. In other words, if it's an Adolf Hitler, to give the ultimate extreme in our days, the universal name that would be used. I absolutely abhor who he was as a human being, and absolutely abhor what he did and the destruction he brought on so many lives. Now let's say it's early on in his career, and you're praying for a change of heart. I still care about the human being. I still want to see that human being redeemed. So right now, this human being is ugly and sinful and filthy and repulsive. And I hate that. And I reject that. And I see the potential for evil. But I care about that human being and want to see him redeemed, and don't even know what got him to where he was. I was in England many years ago ministering and read a newspaper account about a man who had been arrested after multiple accounts of kidnapping girls, raping them, and murdering them. And the account from one girl who got away was, he said, well, now that I did this, I have to kill you because otherwise you would tell. And so that was why he then murdered. And of course, there must have been some demonic grip in his life, the bloodlust as well. So when he was caught, I mean, it was an utter horror. What kind of human being could do that to children? What kind of human being? It's unimaginable. Then, as I read more about him, he was always called Smelly Bob. He was mocked mercilessly by classmates as a boy. He was mistreated. He may have been abused himself. I forget. So he's responsible for what he did. He's responsible. And I utterly reject and abhor that human being for doing that. The evil that he did, that was him. At the same time, I thought he was a victim himself. So fully responsible. But he was a victim himself. There were others that inflicted things on him. So you think, what if things had been different? Or is it possible for him, yes, serve the rest of his life in prison or suffer the death penalty, but for him to be forgiven? The notorious Son of Sam, when I remember seeing a picture of him, the New York's most feared serial killer. I remember seeing a picture of him when he was arrested. I looked at him and thought, he's a monster. And when I heard he got saved in prison, I didn't believe it initially. I know people, I've known him for many, many years. I got to spend time with him years ago. We did a documentary about his life. He's a transformed, redeemed man. And that's the power of the gospel. Let's see here. Okay, question. Matthew, there are so many church offices listed in the New Testament: priests, elders, deacons, apostles, prophets, teachers, miracle workers, healers, helpers, administrators, tongues, evangelists, pastors. All these church offices required for every church. If not, what kinds of freedom does God allow us as far as which offices we have? Thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful holiday weekend with your family. Thank you, and you with yours. Number one, not all these are offices. Like miracle workers, healers, helpers, those speaking tongues, administrators. Those are people who are serving in different parts of the body. These are expressions of the body, all right? And priests are not a New Testament category except in the Jewish world. So you have 5, if you want to call them offices or ministry functions that are mentioned: apostle, prophet, evangelist, pastor, teacher, right? Apostle, prophet, evangelist, pastor, teacher. So, and pastor, teacher are united in terms of the way it is in the Greek in Ephesians 4. I believe all those function in the body today. And I believe they've functioned through church history. We often haven't called people apostles or called people prophets because it would be associated with the 12 apostles, or as if it was an Old Testament prophet or something like that. But I believe those 5 things still function. And to the extent they're functioning through a city, through a denomination, through a church community, it brings health overall. If you just have evangelists, and people are not getting discipled. If you just have pastor, teacher, you're often not doing a lot of evangelism. There's no prophetic voice, often there can be complacency. If there's no apostolic vision, sometimes things can get ingrown. And so these things can the more they function, the better. But you're not going to have every church has all of this in every way. It's just the more that's flowing, the more that's functioning, the better. And God did not set things up in a way that it's rigid, that has to be the same expression everywhere. But the body as a whole should see these different things manifest and these other support gifts and graces manifest. Let's see. Hunter, what's it like being the leader of NAR? Just kidding. Yeah, I was talking to somebody about that the other day. You know what? In all seriousness, though, what troubles me is that there's so much fear mongering. Oh, this evil NAR, this, that. Okay, well, where you have doctrinal differences with charismatic Pentecostals, I have a lot of those differences too. Let's talk about them. And I've written about them, most recently Playing with Holy Fire in 2018, written about them in the decades before that as well. So let's talk about real abuses, and then let's separate different issues, because all this stuff gets put together in this mythical NAR, and it becomes just the bogeyman. So those that are in the Pentecostal charismatic movement look at the critics like, what are you talking about? You know how many alleged NAR leaders that I've met face to face said to me, what's this NAR? Mike, what is NAR? Dr. Brown, what is NAR? Do you have any idea what this thing is? I'm talking about some of the ones that are supposed to be the top leaders. I've talked to them privately. I go, what is that? What are they talking about? And they're not putting anything on. But where there are issues, where there are abuses, let's talk about those. Let's not fear on NAR, evil NAR. Thank God for what he's doing by his Spirit around the world, by the multiplied millions of people coming to faith in the life and power of the Spirit. And when there are abuses, let's talk about them. All right. What's the most important piece of wisdom you would give to someone in their 20s who wants to go past knowing God intellectually and fully know him in their heart? So you have to push against the heavily intellectual mentality mindset and really cultivate the other. And then with your whole mind, love God. For me, it's easy to go a heavily intellectual way, but I so love the Lord and want to be with him that comes first. So I would meet with God in a quality way in the Word. If you haven't been filled with the Spirit and spoken in tongues, that's a wonderful way to edify yourself. And then your spirit begins to bring illumination to your mind as you do that. But it's spiritual first. I would read the Word meditatively. I would get on my knees and read it out loud. If you can get on your knees, get on your knees and read it out loud and talk to the Lord as I read it. Lord, I feel this. Lord, wow, I don't understand this. And then later, having met with him and worship, make sure you worship God and just enjoy him. Having done that, then you want to really study, you really want to dig, great. But don't get pulled away at the intimacy. Lavish Child, why do Christians echo the world in saying sin is sin when Jesus said Judas' sin was greater than Pilate's? He didn't actually say Judas' sin, those who turned him over. I take that to mean the religious leaders. You could include Judas there. And 1 John says there are sins leading to death and some not leading to death. It really bothers me when entire churches ignore verses like these. You're right. Or Matthew 23, where Jesus talks about, it's good to the religious leaders you tithe on mint, dill, and cumin, every last little spice and herb and vegetable. But you ignore the weightier matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. So not all sin is equal. Absolutely right. Not all sin is equal. Here, let me ask you a question. You're got a beautiful home, lots of possessions, all that, right? Somebody is really mad at you, thinks they don't deserve a home like that. They got a bad attitude towards you. Is it worse if they actually go and burn down your home? Yes, it's worse. Is it worse, sir, if you look lustfully at a woman you work with and you look away, but you look again, take a few more peeks because you find her attractive? Is it worse if you actually go and rape her? Yes, it's worse. So sin is sin in terms of don't minimize sin in your life and don't minimize the damage it can do. But of course, there are different levels of sin. Obviously, the Bible says it in common sense. Jim, different translations tell us different things about whom Elhanan killed in 2 Samuel 2019. Was it Goliath the Gittite or his brother? And what relationship would he have with Goliath that David killed as a boy? Yeah, and is Elhanan, there are a lot of questions there, right? So brother in Hebrew could just mean relative. So was it that it was Goliath and a relative and a brother killed? It's debatable. It's hard to be dogmatic on that. Check the NET study notes to see if they give you more insight, but it's hard to be dogmatic on that. That's netbible.org. Diana, what are some really good Messianic Jewish commentaries on the first 5 books of the Bible? They don't really exist yet, but I'm going to be, by God's grace, part of a major project. Don't want to fully talk about it now. That's going to meet some of those very needs. Bruce had said that we need a disclaimer appropriate for Christian radio. It's so unbecoming of these people to call in deceptively, but I admired your ability to keep a level head and take control of the situations as they come. Hey, thanks, Bruce. And yeah, you're going to get abusive callers here and there, but the scope of our show, it happens very rarely, doesn't it? You think of the thousands and thousands of calls we've had. It happens rarely. But appropriate for Christian radio, I also meant it that someone, I can say, hey, ask me questions about my personal life. Well, obviously within limit, right? With certain things, everybody you can talk about publicly and things you can't. So that's just a general statement, but thanks for the kind word. Hey, we're out of here. Have a blessed weekend. And if you don't get my emails, make sure you sign up, askdrbrown.org. And remember, you've got till the end of November 28th. So if you're not watching this live, look at your calendar, look at your watch. You got till midnight Eastern time to take advantage of the double discount using the health code. Plug in health when you order from Dr. Stengler, vitaminmission.com. Hey, the blessing of the Lord be upon you.